welcome back to the Advancing Healthcare Innovation Show. I'm your host, Michael Stamatinos. So excited to have you here. It's amazing. We're having really fun conversations with healthcare leaders that are painstakingly changing the future of healthcare. And we're really focused around healthcare innovation, adoption, leadership, access, and all the good things that make transformational change happen at scale. And if it's your first time tuning in, let me just tell you a little bit about sort of what we're about and what we're doing here. So we're a healthcare innovation company. We're focused on bringing real stories of innovation to life, like real people that are doing real work in the trenches day in and day out. And we're giving them the opportunity where we get to shine the light on them a little bit, and they can share some of the wins and some of the losses and some of the learnings so that you can take it and apply it. So we're in a rapidly changing pace right now of healthcare, and it's really just essential to have leaders that they see the future. They see the future in a different light, and they embrace new ideas, and they know how to put them into practice. And our next guest really embodies that. Katie Swenson. She's one of those leaders. Katie is the executive clinical director of surgical specialties and digestive health clinical program at Intermountain Health. She is a board-certified physician assistant, a U.S. Air Force Academy graduate. Thank you for your service, and an active innovator in healthcare. And she also serves as a strategic advisor on the Innovation Advisory Board at One Utah Health Collaborative. So throughout her career, Katie's made some pretty amazing contributions, and we'll talk about them today, really around sort of sustaining surgical outcomes here and outside of the U.S., demonstrating her resilience, her charisma, and just like a forward-thinking approach. And listen, I've come across a lot of people, and I don't say this lightly, but like she just has an ability. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's like energy to infuse a team with like the ability to feel like they can do better. So maybe it's her ability to masterfully infuse innovation at a system level and basically identify opportunities for value creation. And that's really been her career. And I think why she's been so successful and will continue to be so successful. And it's that contagious enthusiasm and ability to break down complex things into simple processes that gives her a unique competitive edge and putting her teams into high performing teams. So Katie, really, really excited to have you here. Thank you for making this happen, and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I am thrilled to have the opportunity to sit down and visit with you more about wherever the conversation takes us. I know this is an innovation in healthcare podcast. A lot of innovation, I think, also reflects leadership and the culture that you've been embedded in. And so happy to chat about anything and everything that you think is top of mind.
Yeah, I mean, let's just start by what's the best team you've ever worked in? What's the best team you've ever worked in? When was it? Where was it? Can you share a little about that? Start there.
Yeah. Okay. I think we'll start with characteristics of teams, because in that I have been truly blessed to be a part of some unique, high performing teams that create this unique synergy. And so I think part of what I think about when you say what's the best team you've ever had the opportunity to be a part of, to have led, it comes from a place of trust. It comes from a place where people believe in you. And sometimes that's really hard, right? Because that's not always a tangible reality in the moment. Right. But like you said, it's about knowing and appreciating and just having that unquestionable belief in yourself and someone else's success. And so then it's not a matter of if we're going to accomplish this thing, or if we're going to be able to do X, Y, Z and deliver on that. It's how are we going to do it and when. So I think the teams that come to mind, clearly the military was a foundation and a jumping off point for me that honestly set my course and my trajectory, and is through the lens that I really view healthcare. So with that, what I mean is having been trained formally as a leader first before becoming a clinician
Right.
means that I've been able to see and identify unique opportunities that extend just beyond the clinical protocols. How do we look at healthcare and say, okay, what can we do to deliver high quality surgical outcomes, build high performing teams, but also where does healthcare need to go in the context of a high reliability organization? And so something I've appreciated about the military is just really leaning into my value structure, being among similarly minded people that still have the autonomy and the authority to be their own individual leaders, but come together for this incredible purpose and mission. And and then I've been able to slowly transition that to healthcare. And so healthcare is just so special. The areas that I've practiced in clinically, orthopedic surgery, the majority of my career I spent in pediatric general surgery trauma, and then now I practice in pediatric transplant. And you talk about what it takes to be a high performing team in those clinical settings,
Yeah.
and lives are at stake, in both industries. Clearly the military, um, and in the military, it's your life that's at stake and those of your team. In healthcare, it's a little bit different because it's our patients' lives. And so
Right.
a different type of synergy is created when it's one removed from your specific well-being. But in comparing and contrasting those two different types of industries and those types of teams, it's commitment to the mission. It's everybody embracing and valuing what each and every individual has to bring to the table.
Right.
It's that culture of safety and developing emotional intelligence where you can have dissension and discourse within your team, but be
Right.
able to walk away from the table and still respect each other um, while moving the work forward. So those are some of the key attributes, I guess, specifically the teams that I just draw on in perpetuity throughout basic training. I mean, truthfully, we saw things and experienced things at the Air Force Academy post 9/11. 9/11 happened my freshman year, to give you some context. And so we all had matriculated to the Air Force Academy with the mindset of just serving our country and serving this greater purpose, learning some things along the way, getting to fly a jet, or in my case, aircraft maintenance. Um, but the reality was when we were attacked on 9/11 our freshman year, that was a real defining moment for people where people had to really say, okay, what are my values and where am I going with them?
Yeah.
So that type of teamwork is really hard to translate into an experience elsewhere. Um, but I absolutely love where I'm at right now with Intermountain Health in clinical programs. We get to embrace innovation as part of our job. And how cool is that?
Yeah.
And to that point, my partner and I trust each other implicitly. I think the biggest motivator, if you will, that anyone has ever told me was if it's a supervisor or partner, is I believe in you and I trust you and you've got this. And then the doors open, right? Because you just feel like you can go out and do anything.
Yeah.
And then it's about who you surround yourself with and how you do that to get it done.
I think mic drop. Show's over.
Oh, keep going. We're just
No, we're
getting
going. We're going. We're going. We keep going. Keep going. So were you always a leader? Like before the military? Like, did you view
um,
yourself as a leader? Like, where'd that come from? Like, how'd you grow up? Like, I mean,
yeah,
you come from some pretty interesting beginnings.
that's an interesting question. So I think I would have to say yes. And there's some interesting studies in this space, right? There's been twin studies that look at is leadership genetic versus and predispositioned
Yeah.
as opposed to developed and more the phenotype. Are you in a social setting where you're called upon to be a leader and in that you're developed and you grow and you become? I will say I'm firstborn. I was raised to be very driven and independent, and my parents really provided opportunities for me to explore my interests. I was, again, very privileged in that way. Not everyone has had the opportunities I've had in life, but I also think then that does speak to your calling, right? Privilege is an opportunity that is not always earned, but if you have privilege, you do have the responsibility to pay it forward and do something productive and positive with that privilege. And so I've
Yeah.
always grown up with that mindset, that service orientation. Personally, it kind of drives me crazy when people are very inward facing and just focused on, what's going to impact me or what's going to affect me or what am I going to gain from this. And I think that's how I look at things when I network. It's more from the context of what can I contribute in this space? And ooh,
Yeah.
isn't it fun to meet someone new and potentially do something cool together? So yeah, in that, I think I do have some inherent personality traits that could be labeled as a leader. It's hard for me to be amongst colleagues and keep my mouth shut. I've told my teams before, if I'm quiet, there's something wrong. I'm thinking, something's off,
Yeah.
and I'm trying to think about how to express that or articulate what I'm appreciating the issues to be. So yeah, I guess I grew up an athlete, and that has definitely ingrained itself in my work ethic, my mentality about leadership. My hashtag, if you will, is lead like an athlete, because so much of leadership and innovation comes back to, do you eat right? Do you sleep right? Do you train? Do you get coaching? Have you built the right team around you? Do you have the right resources? And when we think of ourselves as leaders, very similar to professional athletes,
Yeah.
um, that also contributes to kind of my mentality about how to approach innovation and entrepreneurship.
So tell me, like, what is your definition then of innovation? How do you define innovation, and how does that translate to like the way Intermountain defines innovation?
Great question. I think innovation is two-part, and really, if we're thinking broadly, creativity is preempts innovation, right? So everybody has the potential to be creative. You just need to
Yeah.
be able to stop and think and dream a little bit. But innovation encompasses creativity to the extent of executing on that creativity. It's not enough to dream big. You have to be able to execute that dream in order to actually innovate and create.
Mm.
So I would say in that, creativity is the art of dreaming and the imagination, and then innovation is the doing side of that dream. And I think then you're getting into more, what are the characteristics of an innovator or an entrepreneur? Exploring this space of curiosity, which is a whole mindset in and of itself. I'm very type A structure, both in the military and clinical training, protocolized, process oriented. How do you take someone with what some would say would be a fixed mindset and transform them into this creator or this growth mindset? And there are a ton of different exercises that you could do to do that. But it's almost like we have to undo our own framework of thinking and doing in order to release ourselves, if you will, and kind of release the shackles of reality and be able to step into this dream state where it is about design thinking. It is about our tolerance for navigating change management, if you want to use like the leadership terminology. It's about stepping into this portal where we get to freely imagine a utopia of not what is right in front of us, but what could we build? What would be ideal
Yeah.
state? And then I think the other part of that, aside from just getting in the right mindset, is developing a resistance or a resilience, depending upon how you want to look at it. But it is this like dogged determination to refuse to believe or accept that this is as good as it gets.
Yeah.
As soon as you allow yourself, and I say allow yourself because I'll reference my experience in basic training, but as soon as you've allowed yourself to think about, even for a split second, like self-doubt or what if, or one of my favorite terms is, stop shoulding on yourself. I should know this. I should
Yeah.
be able to do that. Like,
It
stop
triggers
shoulding on
shame.
yourself.
It triggers shame,
It
Oh, you
does.
should do this. It's like, people just no
Exactly.
bueno. Yeah.
No bueno, exactly. At all. And it's just this like perseverance and kind of mind shift to, I'm just gonna not accept that current state is gonna be reality in
Yeah.
perpetuity. And
Yeah.
so in that, once you accept that, it's like, okay, now I'm past the gate. Now what? Like, now what do we get to do? Now we get to build teams where I get to say, here's what we need to be successful. And here's the vision of where I'm thinking we can go if we have the right resources, if we have the right team, the right environment, the right culture. Um, Creating is something that's so fun for me because I just love the no limits. Uh,
So when are you most creative?
when?
Yeah.
Okay, well, this goes back to leading like an athlete.
Okay.
I working out and the gym is my sanctuary. Like, do
Got it.
not mess with that time.
Right.
It's beyond just moving heavy things and doing some plyometrics and, doing some cardio. That is my thought. That is
Got it.
my um space and time that I go to connect with myself, to reflect, I'll have crucial conversations in my head. If there's something coming up, I need to talk through that. I need to work
Yeah.
through that,
Yeah.
get all the emotions out into something productive. I'm going to go row for an hour and it's going to be the longest, fastest, best row I've ever done if I've got a crucial conversation coming up. Um, but taking that potentially negative energy and turning it into something positive, I really do quite well when I'm taking care of my own physical well-being.
Yeah.
Honestly, I have done some of my best thinking and penciling, and I'm a note taker. I'm old school. I love highlighters. I love writing things down. There's something to be said for making the physical connection and commitment to what you put on paper. And that's been
Yeah.
studied, in sociology and business school and whatnot. So I have a million post-it notes everywhere, but traveling, on the airplane, I put my
Nice.
earpods in, I listen to music constantly, and that's a source of inspiration. And then honestly, the shower. Like, there are very few places where
Yeah.
moms get free time where no one bothers
Yeah.
them.
No
And
distractions. Yeah. There.
yeah,
There you go.
yeah. And so, yeah, just kind of thinking through things in that quiet space where there's some background noise, where you're allowing yourself to just kind of relax and like think.
All right. So now we know when you're most creative. Now we kind of have how things are working there. Switch gears a little bit. What are you focused on? What are you working on? Where are you trying to innovate? Can you maybe share some stories, some examples of like where you think innovation is happening, where you're proactively working on something? Can you kind of maybe take us through an example?
Yeah. Great question. I think this I'll just start by saying I think this question leads back to everyone's individual passion.
Yeah.
Um, and when you find your hill to die on, it's usually reflective of what you're most passionate about or what you're really good at. Adam Grant says, don't pursue things that you're most passionate about. You might not even be good at them, it might be a waste of time, but instead focus on the things that you're really good at. And it's so interesting that you asked that because over the past probably 2 years now, I've been studying business analytics and getting more into the digital space. And as a bio pre-med major who has been all about the life sciences, I look back and I find it fascinating that I pursued an MBA. Never saw that coming, never even dreamt about getting an MBA or getting into business, and definitely didn't see myself getting immersed in data analytics and platform design and, how do you transform healthcare with technology? Because that is just, at least what I've told myself for years, that's just not my area of expertise. That's not me. That's not how I think. And I'm kind of just naturally proving myself wrong in that, which is really funny to prove yourself wrong. But it's the path I've found myself going. And the more I pursue digital health tech, platform design, analytics, the more I find, one, I don't know. I mean, I think that's probably most of our callers would say the more experience we get and the more opportunities you have, the more you realize you've learned, but the more you realize you also don't know. And so I
Right.
just find myself getting more and more immersed in this world and being really excited about where we're headed in healthcare. Um, so I'd say the digital space, and in that, in my current position within Intermountain Health, we are looking at moving our digital first strategy forward in surgery specifically. There is so much opportunity, and I say opportunity to mean how we take better care of our patients and a more cost-effective, sustainable model.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so I'd say that's one area I'm really excited about and putting in my time, effort, energy, and resource. And then the other I'd say is, in healthcare we have this idea, and everybody thinks that their patients are the most sick, or my area is the most important because of XYZ, and whether that's attached to a dollar value or a social determinant of needs, cause, whatever it is that people say, well, mine's the best, or should be prioritized the most. I think the opportunity to break down the ego in healthcare a little bit. We say we're patient-centered, so now let's demonstrate that. And what that means is coming to the table and redesigning our teams in ways that healthcare hasn't thought about. So for example, we've been championing something called preoperative optimization, which is not necessarily new or novel in itself, but my plight, if you will, as executive clinical director in partnership with my dyad partner has been, how can we take surgeons and surgical teams and not own the upstream process or downstream process of chronic care management, because
Hmm.
our expertise is in the acute, often inpatient space, but now we're looking at ASCs and procedures and clinics and whatnot.
Right.
But how can we take our snapshot of how we contribute uniquely to patient care and start, again, not ownership, but responsibly contributing to this preoperative and postoperative space? And so we're looking at things like surgeons getting more involved in that acute period with things like managing hemoglobin A1C, sleep apnea, smoking, BMI, both overweight and underweight, malnourished.
Hmm.
Because in the context, now here's where the pitch to surgery comes, right? It's, if we can optimize our patient's health with these chronic conditions in this way by partnering with primary care, we're going to reach across that acute care bridge and hold hands with primary care and say, how do we do this together, not just let primary care do it themselves?
That's right.
um, Now you're going to get better surgical outcomes. And so now I have created a carrot, right? Now I've created a carrot that says, we are looking at this from a data standpoint, because data drives decisions and it drives behaviors. And so this is the power of showing people the data and the opportunity that they have to contribute. And then you get to say, as a leader, we can do this. I've been accused, mostly by my husband, of saying, you have really unrealistically high expectations of people. I would say that's half true, because it's fine to have what seems to be unreasonably high expectations of people, as long as you are willing to help them achieve those expectations.
That's right.
And so with that, now that we've created incentives for surgeons to care about diabetes, to care about obesity, to care about sleep apnea and smoking, et cetera, because of those improved surgical outcomes, Now the willingness is to say, well, how do we do this so that by the time they get to my OR, we're going to be able to take better care of them.
But how do you also incentivize the primary care physicians? How do you incentivize them to make sure, like, because are they critiqued based on the outcome of the procedure as well, from a holistic point of view? Where is their what's in it for me, aside from the patient getting better, which obviously to me that's the most important, but
Yep. No, great
there's other
follow-up
factors.
question. So where does that patient go, Michael, after they leave the OR?
Sometimes they go to subacute, sometimes they go home.
Yep. And then beyond the surgery, they go back to primary care for their annual checkup. They go back to primary care to manage their diabetes. They go back to primary care to manage their cardiac conditions. So what we need to realize in healthcare is that it's not my patients are sicker. It's not that my patients are more important than your patients. These are the same patients. It's just that we're different providers. And so
That's
when
right.
you start thinking about, oh my gosh, we're all taking care of the same patient that's just as sick everywhere they go within a healthcare system. And you are the one that's inserting yourself at these different periods along that patient journey. You start really thinking in terms of patient centeredness and how is this patient being set up for success, not just with this procedure, but for their lifetime. And
Right.
that is kind of the beauty of value-based care. And that's where when payers and employers and providers start looking at this as like an equilibrium triangle, as opposed to a power struggle, we can really start to treat and manage patients holistically.
As you were mentioning that, two things. One, I was like, there's like several people I'm going to put you in touch with. First, because
Awesome.
so then, but then two, I think about this as is that level of communication that's happening within Intermountain, is it unique to Intermountain? Is that how can that happen at scale?
Yeah.
Or is
So,
it like I guess what I'm really trying to say is this ecosystem inside of Intermountain, is it just so special that this happens there, or can it happen elsewhere?
mhm. Well, I will say Intermountain does have a reputation for being innovative and strategic in terms of moving the needle when it comes to value-based care. I mean, I'd say those are the two things that Intermountain's fairly well known for as a system.
Yeah.
I've appreciated that certainly from within. Our leaders are very beholden to that mission and that purpose, helping patients live the healthiest lives possible. Um, so in that, I don't think that the actual act itself is unique or can't be repeated.
Mhm.
However, it's the how it gets done. That's your competitive strategic advantage, right? Like, how
Yeah.
can systems do this, accomplish this thing in a way that's unique, in a way that's sustainable, and in a way that delivers superior outcomes? And so I'd say that specifically is what we constantly evaluate within our system. I mean, that essentially is how I look at my job specifically as a clinical strategist, as a leader at the executive level, and I'm very excited to see clinical programs now be able to support our enterprise and look at the whole system for opportunities to do this. So really scaling innovation at the enterprise
Yeah.
level, and capturing that value. So repeatable, absolutely. But the sustainability part is where I think each system has to evaluate its resource, its commitment, because it is not easy. Innovation, as you know, is not easy.
Yeah.
And there has to be that inherent tolerance of failure and not risk seeking necessarily, but risk taking. You have to be willing to stick your neck out a little bit if you actually want to be cutting edge, and you actually want to be the model healthcare system that patients want to come to seek care.
What's
So
like, hold on, what's a risk you and your team took recently? One that you can that you're allowed to share? Like anything come to mind?
I think that generally some of the pilots that we're looking at in the digital space are still proof of concept. And I think going back to my interest in digital and everything I'm studying with business analytics, and just as we partner with different digital companies, a lot of the digital space is so agile that things are coming online and going offline with such rapidity that it's like, wait, we didn't even get a chance to test that out, and now already there's could be something better out there. So I think, being able to gauge when is the right time to jump, and then, okay, here are going to be the terms of what we're going to try, and we're going to iterate, we're going to learn, and it's either working or not, but we're going to have very clear metrics and milestones to define that in order to be thoughtful about our financial circumstances and also the clinical outcomes with the patients.
Mm.
So, I'd say I can think of a couple different pilots right now that have either are in work or are about to launch that we don't know. We don't know. But I think that the mindset is then this is where it goes back to what I referenced earlier with basic training. And it's like learning to trust yourself to know, how to design the process, how to design the implementation phase in a way that is not saying, hey, I have all the answers, we're going to get it perfect. It's more
Yeah.
just trusting your people and asking the right questions. A lot of the innovation space and being able to strategize is about asking your team, who are the experts,
Mm.
the right questions.
So when you're kind of going through some of these proof of concepts, how much data do you need? What's the duration typically in order for you to know like we keep going or we make a pivot?
Yeah. I think for me, part one is, am I entering a social or financial or legal contract with a company or a partner that I trust? And because part of it is I'm trusting them to deliver based on what
Yeah.
they have experienced so far, right? I don't necessarily pretend to think that I'm going to be an N of one, or I'm going to be the first one out of the gate with anything. That is like truly, truly visionary when you're looking at the change agent
Yeah.
adoption curve, right?
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to be the first one out of the gate and have that degree of confidence. It's easier to be an early adopter where there's been a little bit of movement in this direction. There's been some early wins. There's been some steady progress. And then you can say, okay, now we're willing to try. And I'd say, again, leaning on my team because they are the all-knowing. I just get to accumulate information and insights and kind of put them all together to make a strategic decision. But I am really relying on our frontline providers and my clinical programs team to give me the insights that I need to make an informed decision about our overall direction. So with that, you should be able to see results fairly quickly, depending upon the complexity of the pilot, right? If there are a lot of stakeholders, then convening them and getting everyone rowing in the same direction with the right cadence takes a bit of time up front.
Yeah.
But once you start collecting data, if you've designed the pilot, intelligently and with metrics that really matter, that you're really chasing after, I mean, you could collect them as early as 3 months, 6 months. I think a year in most cases is certainly sufficient. So anywhere between that 6 months and a year, I think you should have a pretty good gestalt of, it's kind of like dating someone. It's like you go on a first date and you're like, oh, okay, this is,
Oh, you don't just know right away?
I, okay, I haven't been on that many first dates, I guess, to be able to say that, but I mean, it's kind of like I equate a pilot to a relationship. Like
Yeah,
you
of
get a
course.
sense as you progress, as you communicate, as you collect data points,
Yeah.
as you have experiences that either confirm or deny, your direction. I think where we get stuck a lot of times, Michael, is not necessarily in the willingness to try or the risk involved in like a definitive or discrete amount of time. It's the getting out. Like nobody likes to say this failed or this didn't work or gosh, we invested money and resource and it didn't work and you feel so defeated. And that's what I think sets systems and leaders and teams apart from one another is that persistence and the refusal to accept failure as a setback is actually, I think of the quote from Thomas Edison, I didn't uh, invent the light bulb with one try. I found 10,000 ways that it doesn't work, still looking at it as a positive and what are you going to
Yeah.
learn from that and move forward? And our willingness to, you know, decide definitively, like this is not working, we're going to step away. That's where it takes courage. It doesn't take a lot of courage to just keep letting something cruise. It takes courage to definitively change your course. So I think that in and of itself is, that transitory phase from pilot to action is where people get real uncomfortable with some of those negotiations and conversations.
Love this. We're going to switch gears for a minute. Okay.
Okay.
So we're going to play a little game. I've prepared some things and I want you to kind of get some
I
reactions
hate
to these things.
surprises.
So this actually isn't a surprise because
Okay.
you've posted some of these things. So we're just going to ask you to just kind of give a little bit more context about this. Okay.
Okay.
All right. And by the way, this first one, I think this is you. And I'm just going to take a snippet of it. Energy is a superpower. By the way, I think that's your superpower. But yeah, energy is a superpower. What's your take on it?
Energy is a superpower. Okay, I think I see where you're going with this. And I will say if you're pulling things from LinkedIn, I've been asked before, do you write your own LinkedIn posts or do you have Chat GPT, craft stuff for you? Because I do like to communicate with my audience, on a weekly or bi-weekly basis.
Yeah.
Um, so I'll just answer that question. I write my own posts, sometimes painstakingly, because I love to write. It's cathartic for me, and I love Chat GPT. I will say they have done one post for me, and that was, through an AI and healthcare course through Harvard, where they said, let's practice using Chat GPT. And I was like, oh, okay, this is
Okay.
gonna be good. Anyway, I digress. Okay, energy is a superpower. Let's talk about thermodynamics. So it's been a minute
Let's
since
go. It's your episode. You can talk about whatever you'd like.
um, it's been a minute since I studied chemistry and physics in undergrad, but this is the beauty of kind of a very eclectic academic background is that I get to pull from different experiences, and
Mhm.
then I would say I have unique insights as to the whole because I've, studied in different places and different topics and areas, just like I've practiced clinically in different areas and have seen opportunities then, for healthcare as a whole. So I'm going to reach back to thermodynamics when we talk about energy and just to define that it's really the study between chemistry and physics and looking at how energy is converted, heat, work, the transfer of energy. And the first law of thermodynamics is about the conversion of energy, or
Right.
conservation of energy rather. So
Okay.
energy in a closed system cannot be created or destroyed, right? It's just converted, transferred, etc. When you look at the second law of thermodynamics, it talks about entropy. And how I've thought about this in the context of healthcare, I'm getting there. Just stay with me for a minute. Um, Entropy is a measure of the disorder of a system. Again, knowing that energy cannot be created or destroyed, it's merely becoming more disordered within a system. Think about COVID now in the context of healthcare. We still had to take care of all of our patients. We still had to do all the charting. We still had to, run the trauma bay. OR cases were put on hold, but only elective cases. All the acute cases were still going. So if we think of healthcare as the system in which all this energy is, transferring, now you have this idea that how much energy is available to do work. meaningful, productive, positive work. And it's not surprising that as this system now becomes more disordered and that energy is repurposed, you have things on the back end like very tiny operating margins, supply chain
Right.
crisis, burnout. We're still trying
Healing
to
from that.
get our hands around burnout. All of this comes because that state of equilibrium pre-COVID was completely disrupted. And now all this energy is still in the system, but it's not available to do useful work. Also think about biology in the context of energy. We inherently want to return from a survivalist mentality to a state of homeostasis. And homeostasis, or steady state of our internal environment, is competing with this external, disorder of the system, and we're trying to resist. And now, again, we're referencing change management leadership. How do we manage the entropy of a system while trying to support our teams and get them to a level of homeostasis, so they can then be productive again and fulfilled and engaged and delivering better care and all the things that we genuinely seek in healthcare. So from a sociology standpoint, I'll get away from like the hard sciences and then, continue this thought into sociology. The primitive brain, when it comes to homeostasis, is thinking about the motivational triad. The motivational triad at our core, it's like our primitive brain says, how can we conserve energy? What's the path of least resistance?
Hmm.
Which in order to overcome that, we have to overcome inertia, which takes energy, right? How can we avoid pain? Very animalistic, like people, animals, nothing appreciates pain. So what's the most comfortable? Least resistance, most comfortable. And then the pursuit of pleasure, that dopamine drip, like what actually feels good? How am I fulfilled at my job? And, is what I'm doing meaningful? All of that releases the dopamine. So when I say that energy is a superpower, it is knowing yourself through and through so that when you're thrown into a crisis state, when the system is increasing entropy, and when all you want to do is conserve energy, avoid pain, and pursue pleasure, how are you uniquely positioned to channel your energy? Now I'm talking about like Katie Swenson, Michael Stamatinos, like our
Yeah.
personality, our characteristics, as a leader, as a clinician, as a mom, as an athlete. How do we channel our energy in a way that contributes positively, eases, others' barriers or burdens, contributes to our collective system or community or team or organization in a meaningful way that helps everyone, kind of repurpose and get back to focusing on the mission and the vision of taking better care of our patients. So that was a really long pathway to talk about what all was behind that opening line of energy
Yes.
superpower, but that's like that was
We
shower thinking right
we
there.
just got a front row seat into like your brain, how you make decisions, and you just verbalize it. It was really fascinating.
Oh,
It
thank
was
you.
fascinating. I'm gonna go to the next one. Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Got a couple more.
Okay, let's do it.
This one you wrote, but it was a quote from somebody else.
Okay.
Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Margaret Mead.
Mhm.
Reaction to that.
Well, you and I had the opportunity to chat just a little bit about the recent trip that I got back from Honduras. I just was in Honduras with an organization called One World Surgery. They partner with another organization called Nuestros Pequeños Hermanos, or NPH. And the mission of that organization is to deliver surgical care to patients, to countries that don't normally have access. And it is a really beautiful model. I am so grateful that the teams, embraced me as a provider. My partner asks me to scrub in with him, and so I get to first assist in ENT and also orthopedics. Honestly, when you see well-intended, skilled individuals that just want to improve someone else's state of being, there's nothing that that group can't accomplish. It is forward thinking, it is outward facing, it is selfless, it is deference to the mission above all other barriers or challenges, financial, clinical. I mean, we talked a little bit about how there are different medications and different surgical devices, equipment, tools,
Right.
instruments on there, how you have to improvise. Um, but honestly, when people are so knitted together in spirit because of their desire to deliver on the mission, truly, I really believe that you leave this state of, well, this is just how it is. And we're going to go create something new and better because it's the collective whole of us. And we're going to just get creative about how we deliver our mission.
And you feel like you can innovate within constraints. You think sometimes constraints
Absolutely.
create greater levels of innovation?
Absolutely. I would say almost the best innovations come because there are constraints in place. It's interesting when we're comfortable, again, going back to conserving energy, avoiding pain, pursuing pleasure, it's easy to cruise. It is really easy to cruise. But when you are hungry and you have the hustle and desire to want something better, bigger, um, you find ways that you didn't think were possible to break through those barriers. And if those barriers didn't exist, we would have no reason to push ourselves.
Right.
And so I think that gets to, the point that innovation really addresses is you can dream these thoughts, but that doesn't make you an innovator. That makes you a dreamer. And so that innovation piece is the doing, like we opened with. And it starts with there's a problem. And there's a problem, and you feel that problem or you recognize that problem because there's friction. And friction drives behaviors. We talk about incentives or misaligned or perverse incentives in healthcare, of which there are
Right.
abound. But when you feel tension or friction, or it's not easy, it's painful, and you have to exert extra energy, then there's a problem and there's an
Yeah.
opportunity where there's a problem. And that problem then says, aha, like we have the chance to innovate a better way.
Yeah. Absolutely. This is the last one because I want to make sure that we get to the wrap up component. Um, as I'm reading this, and as I kind of prepped for this and did this, I kind of had an idea of like sort of viewer. This just completely validated it in terms of how you grew up, where you came from. But I'm just going to read this one quote. "'Tis a gift to be simple. 'Tis a gift to be free."
Hmm. Yeah, we can take life and make it really, really complicated. We can take our circumstances and become victims. And yet, in thinking about everything we've talked about in this conversation, innovation is just the desire to improve upon one's state of being, to make it a better place for someone else, to say, you know what, you're not going to have the same challenges and barriers and perceived failures that I had because I'm going to make it better for you. And then you will have your own battles to fight.
Right.
So I do think going back to like paying it forward and then thinking about our unique contribution, don't get overwhelmed with having to eat the elephant. There are so many problems out there. There are so many challenges and what are you uniquely passionate about? Like just start taking it one step at a time and then don't stop. I think that's one of the biggest things I've appreciated in studying this digital transformation era that we're in is you just got to get out there and start because once you
Yeah.
do, the momentum, you need to just keep that going. I think about in the context of leadership and being simple and just being liberated to be our whole, self. And I think that's been a gift. Thinking about what teams I've been a part of, one of your original questions, to be able to show up and be your whole self and be celebrated and accepted for that is such a gift that any team can give its members. And so don't get overwhelmed. Don't over dramatize. Don't make complex things like so impressive in your mind that they become obstacles for you. You really have the ability to take something really big and just say, okay, here's the actual issue. All the things that we talked about with energy, etc.
Yeah,
Change management. How can I create an environment to help my team thrive? Like that's all it is. And that's navigating change management. And so how then we want to do that? All right, let's talk about it and figure it out. But we're not going to let chronic disease win. We're not going to let COVID win. We're not going to let politics or, greed or poverty win. We need to take these big, really complicated topics and get people at the table and just say, okay, how are we going to do this? And we're going to figure it out. And it's going to take some time and some effort and energy. But that's where getting the right people at the table is so important.
absolutely. Freaking lutely.
I didn't know if we can cuss on this show or not, but
It's your episode. You can do whatever you want.
we'll keep it. We'll keep it
We'll
clean.
keep it PG. So
Yeah. But the military taught me that too, by the way.
yeah,
So
just have some discretion, discernment. That's always helpful.
that's right.
So
It's actually been shown to be healthy, by the way. There are papers that show cussing is healthy. So our viewers can, go look up the research.
okay, we'll drop F-bombs after this, after we stop recording. Okay, so for those of you that have tuned in today, this was pretty spectacular. This was really spectacular. And I think if you don't leave this conversation feeling inspired, enthused, or perhaps maybe even with a bit of transfer of energy and a pop in your step, then you got to check your pulse because you're probably not living. So, Katie, this really over delivered. Really
Oh,
appreciate you, what you stand for, your morals, your ethics, your values, and how you're just trying to really add value to other people and elevate those that are around you. That simple as that. You can't innovate unless you lead. You start as a leader, you grow as a leader, you innovate, and you continue to move forward. So if you like this episode, please feel free to share it, to comment on it, to like it, or even just write in the comment section, like what was the thing that stood out most to you in this conversation? Because there were many. So pleasure to see you again, Katie. And I look forward to the next one. You're always welcome to come back on.
absolutely. Thank you so much, Michael.